You know that feeling when you were a kid and summer vacation felt like an absolute eternity? I mean, you had these endless weeks stretching out in front of you, packed with bike rides, scraped knees, and just entirely new worlds to discover. It literally felt like a lifetime. But now as an adult, you blink in January and suddenly you're carving a pumpkin in October, just wondering where on earth the entire year went. It's a shared and honestly slightly unsettling reality for all of us, this feeling that the years are just flying by on fast forward. Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how we can actually hit the brakes.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Why do those early childhood summers feel so incredibly expansive compared to the blurry, fleeting months of adulthood? Our subjective perception of time is, hands down, one of the most fascinating quirks of the human experience. While a physical clock ticks away objectively, our internal metronome plays by a completely different set of rules. So to really understand why, we have to look at history, psychology, and some incredibly cool neuroscience.
The oldest and probably the most intuitive explanation for this is the proportional theory. This was originally cooked up by a 19th century French philosopher named Paul Janet, and it's basically just pure math. Think about it. When you're a 5-year-old kid, one single year represents a massive 20% of your entire lived experience. But fast forward to age 50, and that exact same 365-day period is now just 2% of your life. Because each successive year represents a mathematically smaller fraction of your total timeline, it naturally feels shorter when you look back on it. Now, while the math is super elegant, it doesn't actually tell the whole story of how our brains process the world.
So here's the absolutely crucial point. Our brains do not measure time by a ticking clock. They measure time by memory density. It's kind of like your memory is a giant hard drive. When we're young, life is absolutely packed with attention-grabbing firsts, right? Your first day of school, your first time riding a two-wheeler, your first trip to the ocean. These novel experiences require deep cognitive processing. They are richly encoded, saving massive, highly detailed files onto your mental hard drive. Because so much data is stored, that period feels incredibly long when you look back on it. But adulthood? Well, adulthood is largely dominated by routine. The commute, the endless emails, doing the laundry. When experiences are repetitive, the brain conserves energy and basically just stops taking notes. It compresses all those events, which makes time totally fly by.
Physics and psychophysics actually model this exact phenomenon. Research on human time perception shows a curve that rises really steeply in our youth before it just kind of levels off. Researchers use a concept for this called the just noticeable difference. Because your memory bank is relatively small when you're young, adding 1 year is a huge, very noticeable addition. But as you hit what researchers call the inversion point, which is right around the age of mental maturity, your baseline of memories is so vast that it actually takes multiple years for your brain to accurately gauge that a single year has even passed. Your sensitivity to the passing of time decreases, and that curve just flattens right out.
Section 1. The neuroscience of time and the biological machinery. So we know the psychology and the math, but what is physically happening inside our heads? Let's move beyond the theory and look at the actual biological machinery that is literally stealing our time.
Now, we usually hear about dopamine in the context of, scrolling on our smartphones or eating an amazing slice of pizza. It's famously known as the reward chemical. But a 2019 study in Trends in Neuroscience revealed something pretty incredible. The dopamine system in our brain also responds incredibly strongly to novelty and change. When you experience something distinct and new, this massive rush of dopamine fires straight into your hippocampus, which is the brain's memory hub. And this chemical release literally stamps vivid, highly detailed memories right into your brain, physically making those specific moments feel longer and much more expansive.
And this brilliantly illustrates what researchers at UCLA discovered. They found that when we detect a new event, a dopamine-producing hub called the ventral tegmental area just lights up. As researcher David Kliwet describes it, dopamine inserts these small wedges into our stream of consciousness, and that pushes our experiences farther apart in our memory. So think about it. When we lack novelty, we lack dopamine, which means we lack those wedges. The result? Our days just kind of blur into one continuous, really short stream.
But hey, it's not just about memory and coding. It is also about our fundamental processing speed. Take the data from faint research on the pupillary light reflex, which is basically just how fast your pupils constrict when exposed to light. There is a clear linear decline in that physical speed as we age. Why does this matter for time? Oh, because it acts as a biomarker for our brain's overall processing speed. As our neural networks age, our internal clock speed naturally slows down. If our internal clock is ticking slower, it means objective time in the outside world advances further between the events we're actually sampling. It's like your brain is running at 45 RPMs while the outside world is spinning at 78, creating this incredibly powerful illusion that time is accelerating.
Moving on to Section 2, the holiday paradox, or how time gets totally warped on vacation. This clash between how we process time in the present moment versus how we process it in our memory leads us directly to this fascinating psychological quirk.
Psychologist Claudia Hammond popularized this concept, and it perfectly highlights how our minds use two entirely different tools to measure time. See, we have our prospective self, which gauges time as it's happening right now in the moment. And then we have our retrospective self, which judges time when we look back at our memories. Usually, these two are pretty much in sync, but high-novelty environments, like, say, an incredible vacation to a brand new country, completely disrupt this equilibrium. While you're on the trip, your brain is super engaged in having fun, so time just seems to fly by for your prospective self. But because you're surrounded by novel sights, new sounds, and distinct experiences, your brain is frantically laying down massive amounts of dense memory. So when your retrospective self looks back a week later, it feels like you were gone for an entire month.
Now let's compare that amazing vacation to your average run-of-the-mill Tuesday. Dr. Matt Johnson, a professor of psychology, sums it up perfectly. Routine is the absolute lowest novelty experience we can have. Because we generally don't engage our brains with distinct newness as we get older, these repetitive routine experiences totally fail to trigger a heightened state of attention. I mean, your brain doesn't need to record the details of your morning commute for the 1,000th time, right? So when you look back on your week, or your month, or even your whole year, there are zero memory landmarks to anchor your retrospective self. The events just get compressed, and poof, the year is gone.
Section 3. Bending time and the interventions we can use. Let's see how all of this builds into something we can actually control. Because honestly, this isn't some depressing story about the inevitable, unstoppable loss of time. We don't just passively move through time, we actively construct it. And that means we absolutely have the power to slow it down.
Here are 4 awesome science-backed interventions that literally act as a time bender for your brain. First up, seek distinct novelty. And hey, it doesn't have to be a lavish trip to Paris. Just take a new route home from work, cook a recipe you've never tried before, or even listen to a completely new genre of music. Feed your brain those dopamine wedges. Second, spend time in nature. Studies actually show the great outdoors literally stretches our subjective experience of time by shifting our focus completely away from the ticking clock. Number 3, embrace awe. Go to a new art exhibit or just go outside and look up at the stars. Moments that spark wonder heavily anchor our attention to the present. And finally, practice mindfulness. Simple things like deep breathing and genuinely focusing on the present moment forces your brain to stop running on autopilot and actually record the now.
So I want to leave you with one final, hopefully provocative question. What new memory are you going to create today? We now know exactly why time speeds up on us. It's the cozy comfort of our routines, the natural slowing of our neuroprocessing, and a lack of those vivid, dopamine-fueled firsts. But by actively pursuing novelty and intentionally breaking our routines, we can absolutely trick our biological clocks. We can lay down fresh, new memories, insert those vital wedges into our timeline, and actually stretch out our one wild and precious life. So please, don't let your brain run on autopilot today. Get out there, break the routine, and